Hi guys, I hope everybody's doing well. We are looking at perimeter and area today. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is always, of course, your favorite thing, which is your vocab. So I'm going to give you a minute here. Well, you're going to give yourself a minute. You're going to pause your video and fill in the vocab words here. Okay, so pause and fill in those definitions for perimeter, height, base, and area. Okay, so now that you have those filled in here, we're just going to kind of quickly go over them. So perimeter is just the distance around a two-dimensional shape. So it's really just adding up all of the side measures. Okay, so the sum of all of the side measures. The height of a figure is the distance from the top to the bottom to the top of the figure. Okay, the base is just the distance of the bottom part of the figure. And then the area is the number of square units inside of a figure. So you want to make sure when you're doing area on your answer, you always have units squared. Okay, so make sure that you have your units squared on your answer there. Okay, so we have some formulas here that we're going to look at. So first is the perimeter of a square formula. So for perimeter of a square, since all the sides are the same, instead of doing like s plus s plus s plus s, you can really just do 4 times s, okay, only because all of the sides are the same. For perimeter of a rectangle, you're adding up the length and the length, and then the width and the width. Okay, so a lot of times you'll see this as 2 times the width plus 2 times the length, okay, because there's 2 of each of those. For area, for a square, you would be doing the base times the height, and since they're both s, you're going to see this written sometimes as s to the second power, because you're really doing s times s. Okay, so that would be for area of a square. For area of a rectangle, you're doing the length times the width, or the base times the height. And then for area of a triangle, remember this is 1/2 base times the height. Okay, because if you think about it, a triangle is half of a rectangle, right? Like if I took this rectangle and cut it in half, that's my triangle. So that's why it is 1/2 base times the height. Okay, so if we look at this first problem, we're finding the area and the perimeter of each figure. So for the perimeter, we'll start with for this one. So it's a square, and we know that because of tick marks. So all the sides are the same. So we're going to do 5.1 times 4. Okay, so if we do 5.1 times 4, that's going to give us 20.4. And we're going to put the units, and for perimeter, it's just units because you're just adding up all the sides. For area here, because it's a square, we're going to do 5.1. You can do 5.1 times 5.1, right? Or you can do 5.1 squared in your calculator. So 5.1. And again, if you want to do the squared button, you can do that. If you want to do 5.1 times 5.1, that's the same thing. Okay, and this would give you 26.01 and kilometers squared. Okay, since it's the area. All right, so for number 2, for the perimeter, we're going to add up all the sides. So we have 7 plus 9 plus 13. So 7 plus 13 gives me 20, plus 9 gives me 29 inches for the perimeter. Okay, and then for the area, we're going to do our formula. So 1/2 base times height. So 1/2 the base, okay, which is the 9 here. And then the height, make sure you know that the height forms this 90-degree angle with the base. So the height is 7. Make sure you don't use 13 as your height. Okay, so you just do 1/2 times 9 times 7. And that's going to give you 31.5. And again, inches squared since we're talking about area. So for number 3, we have a rectangle. So again, perimeter, I'm going to do 2 times 5.5 because there's 2 sides of those. plus 2 times the 2, since there's two sides of those. So I know this is going to give me 11 plus 4, which gives me 15 meters for my perimeter. Okay, for my area, I'm just doing the base times the height or length times the width here. So I'm doing 5.5 times 2, which just gives me 11 meters squared. Okay. Continuing on here, number 4. Okay, so for perimeter, and they're talking about this shape right here, this triangle. This is just giving us basically the height, since we don't have the height in here. Okay, so we don't need that for the perimeter. For the perimeter, we're just going to add up the 15 plus the 5 plus the 11. So 20 plus 11 gives me 31 meters for the perimeter. Okay, for the area, since it's 1/2 base times height, that's why they have this part here added in to show me that the 2 is the height, because it forms that 90-degree angle with the base. So I'm going to do 1/2 times the base, which is 11, and then the height is 2. Make sure you don't put the height as the 5 there, okay, because that doesn't form a 90-degree angle with the base. So I know 1/2 of 2 is 1. So 1 times 11 is 11 meters squared for the area. Okay, so for number 5, another triangle here. So for the perimeter, make sure you're only adding up the outside sides here. Okay, so do not include the 5. So 9, 12, and 11 would be the perimeter. Okay, so 9 plus 12 gives me 20, 20, what does it give me? 9 plus 12, I'm blanking, 21. This is what happens when I don't have to teach math every day. You lose it. All right, sorry. So 21 plus 11 gives me 32 feet for my perimeter. Okay, so then again, for the area, we're doing 1/2 base times height. So 1/2, the base is 12. The height is what forms that 90-degree angle with the base, which is the 5. Okay, so 1/2 of 12 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30 feet squared. Okay, and again, make sure you're always putting that feet squared, or sorry, the units squared for your area. All right, number 6, again, for the perimeter here, you're adding up all the sides. So I'm going to do 7 times 2, since there's going to be two sides that have the 7. I'm going to do 3 times 2 to get 14 plus 6, which gives me 20 feet for the perimeter. And then for the area, I'm just doing base times height or length times width. So 7 times 3 gives me 21 feet squared. Okay. So moving on to parallelograms. Okay. Parallelogram, you're just doing the area of the base times the height. So if we look at this picture off to the left here, again, your height forms that 90-degree angle with the base. Okay. And the base, again, is just the bottom. Okay, so the height must be a right angle to the base. Okay, or you could also say the height must be perpendicular, okay, to the base. So our formula here is just area equals base times height. All right, so for the first example, again, we're just going to do the base times the height. So we're going to do 7.2 times the height, because it forms that 90-degree angle there, 2.9. So 7.2 times 2.9 gives me 20.88 feet squared. Okay, and then for number 2 here, again, base times height. So the base is 15, the height is 9, okay, because they form that right angle. This 11.5 we don't use, that's just like a slant. Okay, so we do 15 times 9, which would then be 135 millimeters squared. Okay, and then for number 3, the height of a parallelogram is 12 inches. The base is 2/3 of the height. Okay, so if I know that the height is 12 and the base is equal to 2/3 of the height, I'm basically just doing 2/3 of 12, right? So 3 goes into 12 4 times. So 2/3 of 12 is 8. Okay, so my base is 8. They already told me that the height is 12. Okay, so I'm just going to plug that into my formula here. So 8 times 12 is going to be what I'm multiplying to get 96 and inches, right? Okay. All right, so last part here is trapezoids. Okay, so a trapezoid is 1/2 the height and then base 1 plus base 2. Okay, so you're doing 1/2 times the height, base 1 plus base 2. So base 1 you can see is just like the top, base 2 is the bottom, and it doesn't matter if you switch those up. And then the height forms a 90-degree angle. Okay, so again, the height must be perpendicular to the base, and the formula here is 1/2 the height times base 1 plus base 2. So if I look at number 1, again, my bases are going to be connected by the height here. So I'm going to plug this into my formula. So half the height is 3, and then I'm going to add my bases, base 1 plus base 2. So half of 3 is 1.5, and then 19, 20, 21, 2, right? When I add those together, so I do 1.5 times 22 to get 33 inches squared. Okay, for number 2, again, I'm going to use my bases and my height forms this 90-degree angle. I'm not using the 19. So I'm doing 1/2 times the height, which is connecting the two bases here, and then 20 plus 30. I add these together to get 50. 1/2 of 16 is 8. And then I'm going to just do 8 times 50 to get my 400 feet squared. Okay, and then the last one here is the value of x is 10 meters. Okay, what is the area? So again, I have my height, I have my two bases. So 1/2 the height, and then base 1 plus base 2. So half of 6 is 3, and 3 times 18 gives me 54. Okay, so these are all the formulas that you would need to know for trapezoid, parallelogram, triangle, square, and rectangle. Okay, so again, make sure if there's anything you had questions on, kind of star it or highlight it, and then when we start the live class meeting, we can go over anything that you were unsure of. Okay?